standards has been largely discredited. For these reasons, anthropologists tend to write mostly for one another, and they show little inclination to help policymakers or the public become better informed. Still, anyone who's spent time in other cultures probably would agree with me that they differ, and that the differences are important to recognize and understand. If culture actually exists, I decided it should be possible to write about it, and I therefore tried to do that. The two books that come from my effort to put culture back on the agenda were The Political Culture of Leadership in the United Arab Emirates, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2007. And incidentally, it's coming out in a paperback version in the fall. The hardback is extremely expensive, but hopefully it'll be cheaper in the new version. And the second book, Simple Gestures, A Cultural Journey into the Middle East, was published 3 months ago by Potomac Books. The UAE book is a densely academic book covering the 200-year history of each of the 7 emirates with a view toward understanding personal rule. It took me 12 years, actually, to accumulate all this information. The book follows the leaders' transition from largely egalitarian tribal chiefs to authoritarian rulers and shows the influences of increasing urbanization and the involvement of the British in the internal affairs of the region. Over time, the British interventions changed the way rulers related to their followers as they went from a roughly equal status to assuming the role of father figures in their wealthy states. This paternalistic role was one they knew well already from serving as elders in their own family groups. The second book, Simple Gestures, is essentially a memoir of 40 years living and working in the larger Middle East. It includes my early years in Saudi Arabia, studying Muslim-Christian relations in the slums of Cairo, looking at parenting in a Syrian village, interviewing farmers along the Nile about their irrigation practices, and surveying identity symbols in women's dress. It includes a study of the anomalies of orphanages and homes for the elderly in a family-oriented society, and my work on education projects in the Swat Valley of the Northwest Frontier province of Pakistan, as well as in Afghanistan during and after the Taliban period. As would be expected, the kinds of evidence in the two books differs a lot. The academic book on the UAE deals with historic data from British reports, which come with their own biases in trying to control an often chaotic population. I would sift through the day-by-day reports and try to find the persistent patterns in local governance that would give some meaning to the term personal rule. The second book, Simple Gestures, was designed for a general audience and approached culture as I did by arriving at insights through daily interactions with local people. Readers will approach this book at different levels, and that's really okay with me, but I hope some will extract cultural patterns on their own from my experiences. One point that I want to make in both books is that women of the region are not the passive victims we imagine, but are active members of their societies at every level. And to suggest that they're sidelined because they're less visible in public spaces is to succumb to the Western notion that the public sphere is the only sphere that matters. In fact, one could argue that family life in the Middle East is more important than public life to both men and women, and that men as well as women are intensely affected by what happens there. Where spaces are segregated, men are essentially prevented from knowing much of what goes on in the household. Some Arab men and women have suggested to me that we Westerners are the ones out of balance when we stress the primacy of public roles over family concerns. So let me give you some examples of the insights the two books offer. Both books look broadly at culture in the way anthropologists do, as Clifford Geertz says, by hoping to find in the little what eludes us in the large, by stumbling upon general truths while sorting through special cases. For reasons of time, I'm going to limit myself to examples of women, since the images of Middle Eastern women are the ones most in need of a reality check for both scholars and the general public. But the book covers both books cover many more things than that. In the Emirates book, there's plenty of evidence of the role women played in politics, and their very invisibility actually seems to have enhanced rather than detracted from their contribution. I'll give you some examples and then explain about the invisibility factor. In the United Arab Emirates, they tell the story of when Sheikh Zayed I of Abu Dhabi went to the camp of a tribal section to chastise them for not supporting him in battle. The men were away, but as he approached the camp, one young man came forward and claimed that the tribe was as loyal to Zayed as a wolf's paws are to a wolf. Later, Zayed learned it was the chief's daughter dressed as a man, and he went back and married her. She convinced her son and grandson, who were logical successors to the rule, not to become candidates because of her dismay over the many assassinated rulers in the past. And that caused a real shift in the lineages that became the successive rulers. Sheikha Salama Qubaisi was the mother of the more recent Sheikh Zayed of Abu Dhabi. She made her sons swear an oath not to kill one another, which they honored, even when Zayed deposed his older brother Shakbut with the help of the British. She came from a tribe that had defected 3 times from Abu Dhabi over disagreements with the ruling family, and her marriage to Zayed's father permanently improved relations between them. And during her sons' tenures, Sheikha Salama provided daily advice to them about politics and the strategies they should employ. Sheikha Hissa was the grandmother of the present ruler, Mohammed Rashid of Dubai. And if you want to know where he got his commercial and business interests, I think it was from this grandmother. She was a businesswoman whose majlis was more frequently attended than that of her ruler husbands by men seeking business advice. She personally owned the Dubai transit system, including the ferries that crossed the creek, many date gardens, and numerous shops in the souk. Once, when she became frustrated by the weak response of the men in her family, she put on men's clothing and led Bedouin forces from her tribe against cousins trying to depose her husband. There are endless stories like this in all the Emirates, where the aggressive actions of women actually enhanced rather than diminished their reputations. So rather than tell you more anecdotes, I'll summarize some of the ways the women affected politics in that country and explain why their invisibility was important. In the almost continuous tribal conflicts of the past, chiefs felt it imperative to project an image of strength to show they could defend themselves and the groups under their protection. And their strength stood for all the tribal members as a measure of the way they could mobilize resources. Chiefs built their strength largely through alliances with other tribes. When they needed extra supporters or to neutralize enemies, they made more permanent connections through marriages from the tribes in question. The advantage was that the help could be more easily turned on or off and didn't require the permanent maintenance of blood kin. Women also invariably sided with their ruler husbands, even when they came from other tribes. This was especially true when they had borne sons whose futures depended on their father's positions. Women used their extensive information networks to